The morning sun cast long shadows across the cobblestone streets of London as tourists gathered along the route where the changing of the guard ceremony would soon take place. Among the crowd stood Rebecca Whitmore, a woman in her early 40s who had flown in from California just 2 days prior. She wore designer sunglasses, carried an expensive handbag, and had the air of someone who was used to getting exactly what she wanted, exactly when she wanted it. Rebecca had spent the previous evening complaining to the concierge at her 5-star hotel about the lack of personal space during tourist attractions. She wanted the perfect photograph, the kind that would make her friends back home jealous, the kind that would rack up likes on her social media accounts. She had researched the Royal Guard ceremony extensively, not out of respect for the tradition, but because she wanted to know exactly where to position herself for the best shot. As the crowd began to thicken, Rebecca pushed her way forward, ignoring the annoyed looks from families who had arrived early to secure good viewing spots. She stepped over the barrier tape that had been set up to keep tourists at a safe distance from the marching route. A few people called out to her, warning her that she was crossing into a restricted area, but Rebecca simply waved them off with a dismissive hand gesture. In her mind, rules were for ordinary people. She had paid thousands of dollars for this trip, stayed in the best hotel, eaten at the finest restaurants, and she deserved better than to be crammed in with the masses. She positioned herself directly in the middle of the path where the guards would march, pulled out her phone, and prepared to take a selfie with the approaching guards in the background. The distinctive sound of synchronized marching boots echoed through the street. The royal guards were approaching, their red tunics pristine, their bearskin hats tall and imposing, their faces set in the neutral expression they were trained to maintain, regardless of circumstances. These were not actors or performers playing dress-up for tourists. They were active-duty soldiers of the British Army, members of elite infantry regiments with histories stretching back centuries, some having served in combat zones around the world. Leading the formation was Guardsman James Fletcher, a 28-year-old soldier who had served 2 tours in Afghanistan before being selected for ceremonial duties at the royal palaces. James had seen real combat, had lost friends in battle, and took his duty seriously whether he was on a battlefield or performing ceremonial duties in front of tourists. The bearskin hat he wore weighed nearly 2 pounds, and in the summer heat, the thick woolen tunic could feel suffocating, but he never broke composure. As the guards rounded the corner and came into full view, the crowd erupted in excited murmurs, and the clicking of camera shutters filled the air. Rebecca held her phone up high, angling it to capture her smiling face with the approaching soldiers behind her. She was so focused on getting the perfect shot that she failed to notice the guards were now just 50 feet away, marching in perfect synchronization, their boots striking the ground in unison. A police officer stationed nearby spotted Rebecca in the middle of the path and immediately began moving toward her, calling out for her to step back behind the barriers. Rebecca heard him but chose to ignore him. She was almost done with her photo. Just a few more seconds and she would have the perfect shot. The officer's voice grew more urgent, but Rebecca remained focused on her phone screen, adjusting her smile, trying different angles. The guards were now 30 feet away. According to their training and centuries of tradition, the guards do not stop their march for obstacles in their path. They do not break formation. They do not step around tourists. If someone is foolish enough to block their way, they are given a single loud warning. If that warning is not heeded immediately, the guards will march right through the obstacle, whether it is a person, an object, or anything else. James Fletcher could see the woman in the expensive clothes standing directly in his path. He had encountered tourists who got too close before, people who thought the ceremonies were just shows put on for their entertainment, people who did not understand that these were real soldiers performing real duties. He had learned to expect such behavior, but it never ceased to amaze him how entitled some people could be. At 20 feet away, James prepared to issue the standard warning. His voice, trained to carry across parade grounds and battlefields, boomed out with startling authority. The single word echoed off the buildings and cut through the ambient noise of the crowd like a knife. Rebecca's head snapped up from her phone. For the first time, she seemed to register that the guards were dangerously close. But instead of immediately moving out of the way, she held up one hand in a stopping gesture as if she were directing traffic. In her mind, surely they would pause for just a moment. She just needed one more photo, this time with them even closer. It would be incredible. The crowd had gone quiet, sensing something was about to happen. Parents pulled their children back. Other tourists lowered their cameras, suddenly more interested in the unfolding drama than in taking pictures. The police officer was running toward Rebecca now, shouting for her to move immediately. Rebecca stood her ground. She had not come all this way and paid all this money to be pushed around. These guards, in her view, were essentially tour guides in fancy costumes. Surely they would not actually walk into her. It would be assault. She could sue. She had rights as a paying tourist. What Rebecca failed to understand, what many tourists fail to understand, is that the Queen's Guard are not tour guides or actors. They are soldiers with real weapons performing real duties. The rifles they carry are not props. Their authority is not pretend. And their duty to maintain the ceremony and protect the royal palaces supersedes the convenience or desires of any tourist. James Fletcher was now 10 feet away. The woman had not moved despite his warning. According to protocol, he had done his duty by issuing the warning. What happened next was entirely her responsibility. He did not slow his pace. He did not alter his march. He kept his eyes forward, his expression neutral, and continued advancing. At 5 feet away, Rebecca finally seemed to realize these soldiers were not going to stop. Her expression changed from entitled confidence to sudden alarm. She started to step backward, but she had waited too long. Her expensive shoes slipped slightly on the smooth cobblestones. She stumbled, trying to get out of the way. James Fletcher reached her position. Following his training exactly, he did not break stride. His shoulder made contact with Rebecca's side as he marched through the space she occupied. The impact was not violent, but it was firm and unyielding. Rebecca, already off balance from her attempted retreat, was spun around and knocked several feet to the side. She stumbled, her designer handbag flying from her shoulder and spilling its contents across the cobblestones. Her phone clattered to the ground, the screen cracking as it hit the stone. Her sunglasses went flying. She windmilled her arms, trying to catch her balance, and ultimately sat down hard on the street. Her expensive skirt riding up, her dignity shattered along with her phone screen. The guards marched on without breaking formation, without even a glance in her direction. James Fletcher's expression never changed. His pace never altered. The sound of their synchronized boots continued in the same perfect rhythm as if nothing had happened. To them, nothing significant had happened. An obstacle had been in their path, a warning had been issued, the obstacle had not moved, and they had continued with their duty. It was simple. The crowd, which had been silent with tension, suddenly erupted. Some people gasped in shock. Others began to laugh. Many pulled out their phones and began recording the aftermath. The police officer finally reached Rebecca, who was still sitting on the ground, her face red with a mixture of embarrassment and rage. Rebecca began shouting, her voice shrill and indignant. She demanded to speak to whoever was in charge. She threatened to call her lawyer, to call the American embassy, to sue everyone involved. The police officer, a patient man named Constable Davies, who had dealt with many such incidents over his career, simply extended his hand to help her up. Rebecca slapped his hand away and struggled to her feet on her own, her movements jerky with anger. She pointed at the retreating guards and yelled that she had been assaulted, that this was outrageous, that she would make sure everyone involved lost their jobs. The Constable Davies waited for her tirade to wind down, his expression professionally neutral. When Rebecca finally paused to take a breath, Constable Davies calmly explained that she had been standing in a restricted area, that she had ignored multiple warnings to move, and that the guards had every right to continue their march. He informed her that she was lucky not to be arrested for interfering with official duties and for ignoring police instructions. Rebecca's face turned an even deeper shade of red. She sputtered that she was a tourist, that she had spent thousands of dollars to be here, that she deserved to take photos wherever she wanted. Constable Davies remained patient but firm. He explained that being a tourist did not exempt her from following rules and that the guards were soldiers performing their duties, not entertainers subject to her whims. Other tourists had begun to gather, and several were recording the argument on their phones. Rebecca seemed to suddenly realize she was making a scene, and not the kind that would garner sympathetic support. The laughter she heard from some in the crowd made her feel small, an unfamiliar sensation for someone who was used to being catered to. She scrambled to collect her scattered belongings from the cobblestones. Her lipstick had rolled into a crack between stones. Her wallet had fallen open, scattering credit cards. Her broken phone mocked her with its fractured screen. As she gathered her things with shaking hands, she could hear people around her commenting on what had happened. One older British woman said loudly to her companion that some people had no respect for tradition. A father explaining to his young son what had happened said that the guards had done exactly what they were supposed to do and that the lady should have moved when she was told. A group of teenagers were replaying the moment on their phones, laughing at the shocked expression on Rebecca's face. Constable Davies, seeing that Rebecca was not going to be arrested but needed to be removed from the situation, suggested firmly that she move along and return to the designated tourist areas. Rebecca wanted to argue, wanted to demand justice, wanted someone to acknowledge that she had been wronged. But looking around at the unsympathetic faces, at the phones still recording her, at her own disheveled appearance, she found herself without words. She clutched her broken phone and damaged pride, turned on her heel, and stalked away from the scene. Her carefully styled hair was now messy. Her expensive outfit was dusty from sitting on the cobblestones. Her confidence was shaken. As she walked, she could still hear snatches of conversation from tourists discussing what they had just witnessed. The ceremony continued without interruption. The guards completed their march, performed the changing of the guard with the same precision they brought to every ceremony, and returned to their posts. For them, the incident with Rebecca Whitmore was already forgotten, just another entitled tourist who learned a hard lesson about respect and rules. Rebecca made her way back to her hotel, ignoring the curious looks from other guests in the lobby. She went straight to her room, locked the door, and finally allowed herself to feel the full weight of what had happened. And the shock was beginning to wear off, and in its place came a deep, burning humiliation. She looked at her broken phone, trying to turn it on. The screen flickered weakly, showing a fractured image of her home screen before going dark. She would need a new phone. She would need to deal with the embarrassment of what had happened. Most of all, she would need to face the fact that the world did not revolve around her desires, no matter how much money she spent or how important she believed herself to be. As she sat on the edge of her hotel bed, still shaking slightly, Rebecca had no idea that her humiliation was only just beginning. What had happened on the street was just the start. The real shock, the real consequences of her entitled behavior, and were yet to come. Rebecca spent the next hour in her hotel room trying to repair her damaged phone. The screen was badly cracked, making it difficult to navigate, but it still functioned enough for basic tasks. She needed to call the concierge about getting a replacement phone. But first, she felt compelled to check her social media. Perhaps sharing her experience would garner some sympathy from her friends back home. She carefully typed out a post describing how she had been violently assaulted by British soldiers while simply trying to take a photograph. She described herself as a victim of excessive force, claiming the guards had deliberately targeted her without warning. She painted a picture of herself as an innocent tourist brutalized by aggressive military personnel. She hit post and waited for the supportive comments to roll in. What she did not know was that her incident had already gone viral. multiple tourists had captured the entire event on video, from her pushing through the crowd and stepping over the barriers, to her ignoring the police officer's warnings, to the guard's loud command, to her refusal to move, and finally, to the moment of impact. These videos were already spreading across social media platforms, accumulating hundreds of thousands of views. The videos showed clearly what Rebecca's version of events conveniently omitted. They showed her entitlement, her dismissal of warnings, her belief that the rules did not apply to her. The comment sections were brutal. People from around the world were sharing their opinions, and overwhelmingly, those opinions were not sympathetic to Rebecca. British commenters explained the significance of the Royal Guard, their role as active soldiers, and the long-standing tradition of never breaking formation. American commenters were embarrassed that she was from their country, apologizing for her behavior and noting that she did not represent typical American tourists. People shared similar videos of other tourists learning the same hard lesson, creating compilation videos of entitled people blocking the guards. News outlets began picking up the story. British tabloids ran with headlines about the clueless American tourist and the entitled woman who learned Royal Guards don't stop. American news sites covered it as a cautionary tale about respecting local customs and following rules while traveling abroad. The story was everywhere. Rebecca, unaware of any of this, I was growing frustrated by the lack of sympathetic responses to her social media post. Instead of the supportive comments she expected, she was receiving comments calling her out, asking if she was the woman in the viral video, telling her she got what she deserved. Confused and defensive, she began arguing with commenters, insisting they did not understand what really happened. Then someone sent her a link to one of the videos. With growing dread, Rebecca clicked on it. There she was, in high definition, pushing through the crowd with a look of superiority on her face. There she was, stepping over the clearly marked barriers while other tourists stayed behind them. There she was, ignoring the police officer's increasingly urgent warnings. There she was, holding up her hand as if she could stop trained soldiers with a gesture. And there was the moment of impact, slowed down and replayed from multiple angles. Her shocked face as she realized too late that the guards would not stop. Her stumble and fall. Her belongings scattered across the cobblestones. Her sitting on the ground, dignity shattered, while the guards marched on without breaking stride. The video had been watched over 2 million times and was still climbing. The comments on the video were even worse than those on her own post. People were ruthless in their criticism. They called her entitled, arrogant, disrespectful, and foolish. They laughed at her expense. They shared the video with their friends. Some made memes using screenshots from the video, adding humorous captions that mocked her belief that the guards would stop for her. Rebecca felt her face burning with shame. And this could not be happening. She tried to report the videos, claiming they violated her privacy, but the platforms denied her requests. The incident had occurred in public, and she had no reasonable expectation of privacy. The videos stayed up, continuing to spread. She deleted her own social media post, but screenshots of it had already been taken and were being shared alongside the videos as evidence of her attempt to twist the narrative. People were comparing her written description of events with what the videos clearly showed, highlighting every exaggeration and omission. She was being called a liar on top of everything else. Her phone, despite its cracked screen, would not stop buzzing with notifications. Friends from home were messaging her, having seen the videos. Some were genuinely concerned, asking if she was okay. Others were less kind, asking if she really thought the guards would stop for her, questioning what she had been thinking. A few acquaintances she had not heard from in years were reaching out, clearly just wanting to gossip about her viral humiliation. Rebecca turned her phone off entirely, unable to deal with the constant influx of messages. She felt trapped in her hotel room, afraid to go outside in case someone recognized her from the videos. She had come to London to have a prestigious vacation, to collect enviable experiences and photos. Instead, she had become an international symbol of entitled tourist behavior. As evening approached, Rebecca forced herself to leave her room to get food. She kept her head down in the hotel restaurant, avoiding eye contact with other guests. But she could not avoid hearing snippets of conversation from nearby tables. A group of businessmen were discussing viral videos they had seen recently, and one mentioned the tourist who got knocked down by the Royal Guard. They all laughed, and one said she had deserved it for being so disrespectful. Rebecca's appetite vanished. She picked at her food, no longer tasting it, just going through the motions. She felt eyes on her constantly, though she could not be sure if people actually recognized her or if her paranoia was making her imagine it. Every laugh from other tables made her tense, wondering if they were laughing at her. Back in her room, she made the mistake of turning her phone back on. The notifications had multiplied. Her email inbox was full of messages from news outlets requesting interviews, from talk shows asking her to appear, from random people sending her hate mail. Her social media accounts were being flooded with tags and mentions. The videos had now been viewed over 5 million times combined. She found herself reading the comments despite knowing she should not. People were discussing her appearance, her clothes, her expression, her voice from the videos where she argued with the police officer. They were dissecting every aspect of her behavior and finding it all wanting. Some comments were merely critical. Others were cruel. A few crossed the line into genuine harassment. One commenter had apparently done research and found her full name, her hometown, even her place of employment. This information was being shared. And suddenly Rebecca was not just a nameless, entitled tourist, but a real person whose life was being examined and criticized. She felt violated and exposed in a way she had never experienced before. She tried to think about how to fix this situation. Should she issue a public apology? But would that just draw more attention to the incident? Should she hire a public relations firm to help manage the situation? But that would cost money and might not even work. Should she just wait for the internet to move on to the next viral story? But how long would that take? And what damage would be done in the meantime? Sleep did not come easily that night. Rebecca lay in bed, her mind racing, replaying the incident over and over. She thought about all the small decisions that had led to that moment. If she had just stayed behind the barriers like everyone else, if she had moved when the police officer first warned her, if she had not been so convinced of her own importance, if she had shown even basic respect for the ceremony and the soldiers performing it. But it was too late for any of that now. The damage was done. Her face was known to millions of people around the world as the entitled woman who thought she was more important than centuries of British military tradition. Her name was becoming synonymous with tourist behavior at its worst. Her actions would be used as an example in travel blogs and etiquette guides of exactly what not to do. The next morning, Rebecca woke to find the story had escalated further. A British morning show had done a segment on the incident. Interviewing a Royal Guard historian who explained the significance of the ceremonies and the role of the guards. The historian had been diplomatic, but clear in stating that the guards had acted appropriately and that tourists needed to show proper respect. The show had also interviewed Constable Davies, the police officer who had tried to warn her. He confirmed on camera that Rebecca had been given multiple warnings, that she had been in a clearly restricted area, and that she had ignored all instructions to move. He noted that she was fortunate not to have been arrested for her actions. His calm, professional recounting of events made Rebecca's behavior seem even worse. American news outlets were picking up the story as well, and often framing it as part of a larger conversation about American tourist behavior abroad and the perception of American entitlement. Travel experts were being interviewed, discussing the importance of researching and respecting local customs when visiting foreign countries. Rebecca had become an unwitting poster child for cultural insensitivity. Her employer had seen the news coverage. Rebecca's phone rang with a call from her boss. The conversation was brief and uncomfortable. Her boss expressed disappointment in her behavior and concern about how this might reflect on the company. Rebecca was informed that she would need to have a serious discussion with human resources upon her return. The implication was clear. Her job might be in jeopardy. Rebecca felt her world crumbling around her. What had started as a moment of entitled stubbornness had spiraled into a life-altering disaster. Her vacation was ruined. Her reputation was destroyed. Her job was at risk. Her social media presence, which she had carefully curated for years, was now associated with humiliation and mockery, all because she had refused to move when told to do so. She spent the day in her hotel room, too afraid and embarrassed to venture out. She ordered room service and ate mechanically, tasting nothing. She tried to distract herself with television, but even that backfired when a comedian on a British comedy show made a joke about American tourists blocking the guards. The audience laughed uproariously, and Rebecca felt each laugh like a physical blow. Her phone continued to buzz with notifications. Some friends had stopped reaching out, perhaps not knowing what to say or not wanting to be associated with her viral infamy. Other people, strangers mostly, continued to send messages ranging from criticism to mockery to outright hostility. A few messages were sympathetic, but these were vastly outnumbered by the negative ones. Rebecca tried to find videos of similar incidents to make herself feel less alone in her humiliation. She found several videos of other tourists being marched through by guards, but in most of those cases, the tourists had stumbled into the path accidentally or had been taking photos while slowly backing up. Rebecca's case was worse because the videos clearly showed her deliberately positioning herself in the guard's path and refusing to move despite multiple warnings. There was one video of a young child who had wandered into the guard's path, and the guards had shouted their warning, and the child's parents had immediately snatched the child to safety. The comment section praised the guards for their discipline while also praising the parents for their quick action. There was no comparison to Rebecca's situation that would make her look better. As the day wore on, Rebecca began to realize that this incident was not going to blow over quickly. The videos were too widely shared. The story too perfectly encapsulated the problem of entitled tourist behavior. She was going to be remembered for this. Years from now, people would still be sharing the video of her getting knocked down by a royal guard. Her moment of entitlement had been permanently preserved in the digital archive of human foolishness. She thought about cutting her trip short and flying home early, but that would mean admitting defeat. It would also mean facing her employer, her friends, her community sooner. At least here in London, alone in her hotel room, she could hide from the immediate consequences. Going home meant facing everyone who had seen the videos, everyone who now knew what she had done. But staying in London felt impossible too. Every time she thought about leaving her hotel room, she imagined people recognizing her, pointing, laughing, maybe even confronting her about her behavior. The city that had seemed so exciting when she arrived now felt hostile and unwelcoming. She was trapped by her own actions and their consequences. Rebecca finally understood too late what she had done. She had disrespected soldiers who dedicate their lives to service. She had ignored rules designed to maintain order and safety. As she had put her own desires above the rights and experiences of hundreds of other tourists. She had been selfish, entitled, and foolish. And now the entire world knew it. The humiliation was crushing, but perhaps worse was the dawning realization that she had no one to blame but herself. She could not claim ignorance. The barriers were clearly marked. The police officer had warned her repeatedly. She could not claim accident. She had deliberately positioned herself in the guard's path. She could not claim injustice. The guards had every right to continue their march, and she had been given fair warning. As night fell on her second day of hiding in her hotel room, Rebecca sat by the window, looking out at the London skyline. Somewhere out there, The royal guards were still performing their duties with the same precision and discipline they brought to every task. They had already forgotten about her. The rest of the world would eventually forget too, moving on to the next viral story, the next scandal, the next embarrassing moment captured on camera. But Rebecca knew she would never forget. This moment would haunt her for the rest of her life. Every time she thought about traveling, she would remember. Every time she saw a video of the Royal Guard, she would remember. Every time she felt tempted to put her own desires above the rules, she would remember the sound of synchronized marching boots, the firm impact of the guard's shoulder, and the helpless feeling of falling as her dignity shattered around her. The shock of a lifetime, indeed.